Hi folks, it's Paul here. Just wanted to bring you up to speed with some different skills and techniques involving the Raspberry Pi data gathering. And as I've explained to you, we're going to use Microsoft Excel as our business intelligence platform. So without further ado, I'm going to drag over onto the screen here a log file from the Raspberry Pi. I'll just make that a little bit smaller so I can move it around a bit, and I shall also move that. This is a raw log file from the Python code that I wrote, which would be extremely similar to the Python code that you wrote, and I just want to have a look at it basically. So what I can tell you is that it's comma delimited, and what I would like to do in this video is perform some what I call sanitization of this data, because as you can see this is pretty difficult to interpret, but this is what we wrote in Python. And when you're writing your IoT02 BIO2 assignment, I'd like you to give some thought to how this data is formatted and whether or not it could be improved. Now, for the sake of the assignment, we're going to say that this data, which I will give you, is from Loggly. But that's all we're going to really say about Loggly. We're going to say that Loggly gives us the ability to download large amounts of IoT data from a lot of different devices, and then we can manipulate that data and use it. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that this is where it's come from. So it's still in its raw Raspberry Pi format basically. Let's have a look. Now here we've got this timestamp which says date time and date time, and in an ideal world that shouldn't really have been recorded at all. So again, something to reflect on is, could the Python code have been improved to make a difference there? This section here is the date and time, and as you can see that's obviously the year. If I scroll further down, because this is a file that was continually being added to, there should have been some data from 2020. Oh well, there isn't, but never mind. So this says 2019, and then thinking of the format, the 9 is September because we're in an American style format, I think, and the 6th is the day. So the 6th of the 9th 2019, it's the 6th of September 2019. Here again, 24-hour clock format, 10, that's 10 in the morning, 15 minutes past 10 and 38 seconds. This number here, which has also been produced from the, I think it's called the date time, yes, the date time function in Python, is, well, possibly something like milliseconds or some other format. Because I don't really know what it is, I'm going to ignore it for the sake of Microsoft Excel. Here, to a massive 5 decimal places, there's the 5 decimal places, is the temperature, and that is saying that it's 73 degrees centigrade. Okay, now that isn't really quite as it should be, and that brings me on to something else that I would like you to reflect on, is that using the Raspberry Pi with the sensor hat as an IoT device has certain limitations. One of those limitations seems to be that without the sensor hat perhaps being positioned away from the main board, say on a long ribbon cable, it does tend to pick up the temperature of the processor. So this seems to be a sort of design flaw. As I said, you can reflect upon this when you think about the suitability of the Raspberry Pi for this sort of measurement. Here, to an enormous number of decimal places, that's 8 decimal places, which frankly is meaningless on a sensor board that costs £30, is the humidity. And we know that this is the temperature, then the humidity, and then the pressure, because that's how we asked for the data to be supplied when we wrote the code. That was the order that we asked for it to be in. And so that's the humidity, which is probably only accurate to 1 decimal place, if that. And also here is the pressure. The pressure is measured in millibars. The temperature, the humidity is measured in what's called percentage RH, relative humidity, and of course the temperature is just in degrees centigrade. So that is just unpacking for you what this data is actually like. The next thing to reflect on is how would we bring this data into Excel? And as I'll show you in a minute, there's been a few little cheats and things here, but what you would do is you would go to data, just going to move my little webcam there, you would say get data from a file, and the file may have some formatting. I would go for text/CSV. Now you don't actually really have to do this because I'm going to give you some data, but I'm just showing you how it's done for the purposes of broadening your knowledge and also informing your assignment. Okay, I've got one there called logs edit for import. Let's say that that's come straight down from Logly, and then it takes us into a wizard. A bit of a pause going on here, but I think this should have a happy outcome. And here you can see the data has been split into columns. Also notice here there's a lot of brackets and things which also make this data rather hard to handle. That's something else that you can reflect upon. It's fairly easy to remove it. Anyway, you would load this data in and it would open up a new worksheet with the data in, and with a little bit of fiddling about you're going to get to something like what I'm showing you here. I've removed the brackets by doing things like going over to, I'm on the Home tab, going over to Find and Select and replacing things. So I could say find a square bracket and replace that. So this is an example here of find and replace. You could say find this square bracket, replace it with, I just press the space bar there, and you could say replace all. That would remove all of the ugly brackets that you see in this data. Assuming now that this data has been imported into Excel, you could also remove the round brackets in a similar way, and as you can see I have done that here with this data. I'm going to make this data bigger. I'm conscious that these videos are not always that easy to view, and what I've basically done is I have been able to strip out those annoying bits. So if there's anything that shouldn't be there, you just really want values here, you just need to do a find replace and it should get rid of them. What I have now is year, month, day, hour, minutes and seconds. I'll talk about this in a minute, but concat means concatenation of a date and a concatenation of the time. If you remember from somewhere surely in your studies so far, concatenation is where you join together data, usually strings, into one bigger string. The fruits of the labour are here in this column, and here I've just put in the temperature, humidity and pressure. You'll notice also I've created these little header columns here, and I can do fancy stuff with that if I want, make them bold or whatever. So this is what I call the sanitization of the data, bringing it into a format that is going to be useful for us for business intelligence. So because these date and time values are separate, what did I do to actually join them together? And this is what I did. I used a concatenation. I'll just put this onto a PowerPoint slide so you can see it more clearly. Blank presentation, da 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 da. Whoops, something went wrong there. And I just drag this over so you can now see it. Don't know why that screen's like that, never mind. So the command is concatenate. You open your brackets and then you add the different parts together. C2 is the day, because we want to put this into the normal format that we expect in the UK. Then I put a slash in because that is what Excel uses to separate dates. I've put a 0 in there because I noticed that my months didn't have a 0 in front of them. Then the next thing I put in was cell B2 here. I then add another slash and then I add A2, A2 being the year. Concatenate that together, you get 27th of the 3rd, 2020. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, hang on a minute, Paul, that data that I saw was from 2019. Quite right, I have massaged these dates to bring them up to something more recent. I've also massaged these times a bit, and if I'm honest, I've also massaged the temperature, humidity and pressure because I didn't find them to be that satisfactory. Okay, so again, just to remind you, you can reflect upon that in your evaluation of the application that you've created. And again, summarizing that, I would say that a sensor board on a Raspberry Pi is useful, but it does have a sort of a hobbyist, novel sort of aspect to it. I don't think it's necessarily to be used as a serious piece of environmental measuring equipment. Okay, so that's the concatenated date there. I then did a very similar thing with the time, but this time, pardon the pun, I added in these colons here, and then I brought them all together into one massive concatenation, whoops, here, actually here. Let me just put that up for you as well. G4 was the time, H4 was the date. I should say the concatenated time. Oh, my apologies. G4 was the concatenated date. H4 was the concatenated time. If you're dozing off a bit during this video and you're wondering what this is all about, this is me sanitizing the data and making it fit for our business intelligence application. Yes, there has been a bit of massaging of the figures going on, so a little bit of sort of cheating, if you like, but that isn't important. What's important is that we have some data that is realistic and data that we can use to draw conclusions for the company that we're working for in terms of their environmental modeling, monitoring, and the business decisions they need to make their office rental profitable. Okay, so these cells here at the top of the concatenated date and time are a little bit of a mess. And here's something I'm going to show you. It's part of the cheat really, but having got that date and time together,